Okay. Hey everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying your week so far, having a fabulous time. Corstian is on your left. The lowercase name is diabolical, but hey,
Hey, it's
people
what I
have
do.
freedom to do whatever they want, so I'm not going to
Yep.
judge. I'm Josh on your right. We're both the hosts of the I'm on a Mission podcast for football topics. Um, Last week I had a lot of work events come up, so I wasn't able to hop on to discuss. I didn't want to feed Corstian to the Wolves to cover all 256 draft picks because that's one, that's unfair to ask of one person. And two, it's not that like he would be down there forever. So yeah, let's not do that. So instead, what we came up with is Corstian curated a list of teams that he liked coming out of the draft. I have my opinion on which teams I liked. And then we have three players like specifically on draft picks that we thoroughly enjoyed. So six players, couple teams. Um, Corstian, how do you feel about your Broncos coming out of the draft?
Overall, I think it was a decent draft. There's a couple spots that maybe I would have gone a different direction, but overall, I think there's a lot of good pieces that the Broncos came out with that could both be instant starters, decent or rotational guys, or developmental guys that have some upside. But yeah.
Yeah, you look at this team, and I really like the RJ Harvey pick personally, but then
hmm
you have guys like Jody Barron in the first round, not bad at all. Um,
hmm
Took a punter in the sixth round, so that was very
Yeah.
interesting. But most of these other guys I haven't watched too much. I don't know how you felt about the Pat Bryant pick, but
Yeah, that was one of them that I was I felt so about. I mean, I Pat Bryant's very much kind of the little Jordan Humphrey Jr. replacement, even though he really wasn't that good in the first place. He's a good blocker, but um, yeah, it feels like. I mean, I guess he's kind of like the next man up size wise because you got Cortland Sutton is kind of your number one big body guy. Marvin Mims is kind of like your I guess medium sized receiver with the deep threat ability. And then after that, you just kind of got a mix of guys that obviously you're just trying to find roles for. That includes oh my gosh, my mind's blanking on the Broncos. But you
Marvin
have
Mims.
Devon Vele, and then the guy from Oregon who kept on dropping passes.
Troy
Anyway,
Franklin.
yeah. And so those are kind of so it's you got those the big two with Marvin Mims, Cortland Sutton, and then you got kind of guys that you rotate along. But then it's also you got a big guy with Pat Bryant, but you also just drafted Devon Vele, who, despite being a seventh round pick, also showed capability as kind of a big body pass catcher. So it was I thought they might go defense there, get a higher ranked defensive player, but then they did double dip in the third, and they got Sivon Jones, who I'm a fan of. He's a he's listed as a D line / edge player, so he's a bigger bodied edge player, which I'm a big fan of because a big struggle of the Broncos last season was while the pass rush was pretty elite, they were pretty weak run stoppers, and so with a guy like Sivon Jones, you kind of get some edge pressure, but it's mostly there for those run packages that you're expecting. Third and short, maybe even fourth down attempts. You're able to put in a guy like Sivon Jones who hopefully can help a little bit more with keeping bigger bodies in that front seven package.
Yeah, especially with the amount of running backs in the AFC and then just within their own division. If you're thinking about Najee Harris and then
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Pacheco and then Ashton Genty, um, and then Amarian Hampton, who the Chargers just drafted. You want to make sure you have solid guys on the edge that can cut off those angles. So I totally see why they would make this move here. Um, they have great edges in Cooper and then
Benito,
man, I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Like they
Nick
played
Benito,
so well. Nick
yeah.
Benito, yeah. Like they played so well last year, and to have this guy come in on sub packages puts less pressure on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be do everything edges all the time in a long football season.
Yeah. And so with him and then Q Robinson, I think you get a overall strong rotational group of guys because even behind Benito and Jonathan Cooper, you have Jonah Ellis who put up 5-ish sacks last year as a rookie, which I think was great. And then Dondrea Tillman, who also was a pretty solid run. He was okay in run stop. He's probably one of the better run stoppers amongst the outside linebackers or the edge rushers, alongside being able to do some pass rush ability. And so having, uh, Robinson and Jones just adding to that rotational depth, plus potentially decent run stoppers, I think is a big win in terms of at least developmental players that you get later. And then obviously the Broncos, they got a punter. They lost their punter in the offseason. He's from Australia, so that's cool, I guess. And then the tight end from Utah that they got in the 7th. Apparently he's like 4 catches or whatever, but apparently he transitioned from as a basketball player to playing tight end. And so I think everybody's like, ooh, it's kind of like Jimmy Graham. But I mean, like, it's a 7th round guy, not super high commitment. If he develops into a serviceable tight end, awesome. If not, it's just a 7th round guy that potentially develops into something. If not, I'm not really too upset about spending a 7th on a potential guy, you know?
Yeah, the only thing that gives me pause is the Q Robinson pick in the 4th round for him only starting 5 games and projected to go on the special teams according to the reports, and then Caleb Lobner, like just the raw experience from that.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, they're in positions where the Broncos are deep in.
Mm-hmm.
So you're banking on like guys just like learning through osmosis and getting acclimated to the NFL. But
Yeah.
hopefully they prove us wrong, because the first 2 picks looked excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And with Robinson, the 5 games played was just due to injury. And so, I mean, it's
yeah,
a guy who fell maybe a little, probably at most around due to injury. So maybe if he plays a whole season, you see him middle of the 3rd. But like, that's kind of my thoughts on him. But yeah.
yeah. Jumping to the Bears while we're at it, I love the first 2 picks in the draft. Honestly, I was hoping for Calvin Banks.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get him. Was 1 pick away,
Yeah.
which sucks. But I mean, I think Loveland, top tight end on my board. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect it at the time, but loved the selection. No pun intended. Luther Burden, he was my top receiver coming out
Mm-hmm.
of the draft. And I know that's pretty stupid to say with Travis Hunter there, but like if you watch him after the catch and like his dynamicism,
Mm-hmm.
like he might be a more explosive option than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like the route running he's gotta clean up a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about his prospects.
Mm-hmm.
They basically got Keenan Allen at a younger price. Now he's gonna have to summon Luther Burden of 2 years ago, but I think behind DJ Moore and then Rome Dunze,
Mm-hmm.
like this was a great selection. You don't have to worry about like overpaying Keenan Allen anymore, and plus you can go into 12 personnel. So I think the scheme versatility they have, really like that. Ozzy Trapullo wasn't my tackle I wanted them to select because I was hoping they would do one, in the 1st or 2nd round. But
Mm-hmm.
the more I read about him, I like him. I think the only guy I was just like, I don't know, was Shamar Turner.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were other better D tackles in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have taken a chance on Derek Harmon, like try to jump back up to the 1st round. But the Bears' strategy was they were doing a lot of trade downs in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
So for with that and the kind of the value they got on most of these selections, if I'm looking at only Shamar Turner, given like that you just got Grady Jarrett, you invested 2 defensive tackles and Pickens and like Dexter, and you want to give them time, like that didn't make much sense to me. But as a run stopper, I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my favorite day 3 pick was Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. And no, it's not because I
Mm-hmm.
went to school there. He is a great back. I like what he's going to add to the room. And while I hope they add Nick Chubb because they need like an electric inside runner like him, Kyle
Mm-hmm.
Monangai can do that. And I think having Roshan Johnson in the room too, like I think there's some untapped potential that Ben Johnson sees in the 2 of them
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
working hand in hand with DeAndre Swift. So I would look at this and to be like, yeah, Monangai is an exciting player to get excited about, but Roshan might be in for a big year that people don't
Mm-hmm.
expect.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the Bears had a decent overall draft. I do like the Luther Burden pick. I think I saw a lot of people, at least from like fantasy football side of things, worry about Rome Odunze, thinking that like, oh, are the Bears not super happy with him? I don't think that's the case. If anything, this is like a future pick kind of thing where, you're probably looking to move on from DJ Moore after his contract ends. Potentially a trade guy if the production doesn't bounce back to like two years ago, because just because Burden and Moore do have similar play styles or at least skill sets, and so it's like obviously having three wide receivers is kind of like a luxury, but this kind of makes me think that okay, so your future expected core of guys is going to be you have Caleb Williams, and then you're gonna have Odunze, and then you're gonna have Burden as your 1-2, and then Loveland at your tight end spot, like looking 4 or 5 years into the future, which I think is a solid core to have and kind of build up, a future multi-year powerhouse team.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anything, Rome Odunze is going to have a fantastic year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, coming here, I think whether it's like the attention that DJ Moore is going to garner and like being 1 year into the league, he might have a better year. I think even with Burden, the excitement with him, I would exercise caution because he might not get as much playing time this year because maybe with the commitment to the run and like it'll take a while to adjust to the game. But I think long term, I really love this move for what they do. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the move I was expecting, but I'm happy they
Mm-hmm.
made it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like the Loveland pick, I'm actually a fan of that too. I think either tight end they went with, I think would have been a solid value for them. Obviously, people say Cole Kmet, but he's like I think 1 year left on his contract, so it seems like with Ben Johnson, it's like he has guys that he is ready to move on from. I think in the next couple of years, and is kind
And
of bringing.
Loveland's a better player, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cole Kmet, he's been a solid tight end throughout his career. He hasn't ever been like game breaking, I'd ever say. I mean, but he was like a solid, serviceable tight end. There's a reason why they extended him a couple of years ago. But obviously, I think Loveland has higher ceiling. Obviously, being a top 10 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think this is a
Some
lot of
people
Ben
thought
Johnson.
better
Yeah.
than Sam Laporta. I wouldn't go that far, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to be excited about Loveland.
Yeah.
Okay. I know I have one other team, but I want to let you take the wheel and look at a couple teams' rosters that you like coming out of the draft because there are a couple you wanted to go through.
Okay. Controversial team ish, but I'm gonna go with the Saints. I think they have one particular blunder being the Tyler Shaw or Shaw pick or whatever, which I'm like, I mean, with this, like, I guess the Saints just must have had him really high on their board. They must have just loved, the meetings that they had with him. And so it's like, I mean, that's kind of my explanation, but also historically, quarterbacks that are drafted even in round 2 and just that and beyond historically end up being backups or career backups. You don't see too many guys end up being starters. So, maybe he's just like a guy that they think can be a serviceable backup. Hopefully, if everything goes well, he's a starter, but if not, it's a second round quarterback. But beyond that, I'm a fan of the Calvin Banks pick. Offensive tackle was a must draft, I think, for this team. They've just had struggles with offensive tackles. One of theirs just retired. And so you're like, Saints are very much they need new offensive tackle talent right now. And then, so obviously, big fan of that. I am a fan of Vernon Broughton. I think that's how you say his name. I think he transitioned to football from like another sport, if I remember what I read correctly. But anyways, overall, they said that he's a really explosive player, despite his like not a ton of experience that he has. Could get better at run blocking or like run stop. But then you look at his like measurables, he's 311 pounds, 6'5", so like he's already a big dude. And then with that, the Saints very
35
much
inch arms.
like man is massive. And so I'm just thinking that, it's like a 3rd round pick. He's a guy that could potentially be a day 1 starter. Especially, I mean, you look at the Saints front 7, they're all older players. I think like the youngest guy in their like out of their first and second string D linemen is like the youngest is like 28 or something. And so it's like you need desperately to bring in some young talent that you can start developing, whether or not they start this year or next year. So I think that was a good pick there. Jonas Sanker, the safety that they drafted next, also a solid player. Their safeties are really old. He's kind of a can do it all type of player. Obviously, he has, I think there's like some issues with, like playing as a deep safety, but he's like decent in the box and he's good at like intermediate kind of coverage. And so he's a guy that in like a year or two, I think could be a solid starter once, is it Eric or Justin Reed? And then Tyrann Mathieu eventually get moved on from. And so it's like that I was a fan of. And then they also did draft later Devin Neal, who I think was a guy pre-draft that I was pretty excited for. I think people were surprised he fell to the 6th. I think that's about where you expect to see a more one-dimensional style downhill runner. But I think obviously like Kamara, he's still good, but he is aging as a back. And then you look at the rest of the Saints running backs, and you have Kendre Miller, who's like never consistently been healthy enough, or at least the previous coaching regime hated. So he never got playing time. And then you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and we kind of know how that's been. So having someone else in there that you think could be more consistent, I think is a good value there. But that's kind of the thoughts I had on this the Saints draft.
Yeah, I liked your recap. Devin Neal, just real quickly, like he can do a lot of things that Alvin Kamara can do on like the outside zone runs.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that. The Tyler Show pick, I don't think I need to dive further into that. I thought that was, especially with Jalen Milroe on the board and going a complete round later,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was sitting right there for them. They could have chosen Shador if they wanted to. That was a wild slide.
Mm-hmm.
I can maybe get your thoughts on that later, but just I don't know if you saw the pre-draft like clips of Tyler Show thrown at the combine.
Oh, I've seen those.
Well, that was a man who went 3 rounds ahead of Shador, and that's all I'll say on that. So I think it was clear like reach where they were drafting need above like best player available. You clearly saw that because they knocked it out of the park with the Calvin Banks selection. You're like, oh wow, Saints already understand their weaknesses, and then they go pick Tyler Shaw. So it's just like, what the heck?
Yeah, like overall, I feel like the Saints kind of. I
think it's clear Derek Carr is not going to play this year, so that's why they want to move. But I thought that was just not a good process-minded move, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But outside of that pick, I thought it was a decent draft class from them. I think they addressed a lot of needs both for the now and for a couple years from now. Hopefully, one day the Saints actually have cap space, because I don't know how they do it, but like they just never have cap space. And I'm like, how do you manage to bring in guys? And so they just got like a bunch of guys on like long contracts because they keep on pushing back the money, which makes it so that they don't ever have money now. I feel like I could be hired to be the Saints GM, and
the cap space isn't real, man. That's what they seemingly think.
Would get changed up a bit. I think Saints fans would love me. They would just see, wow, we have $10 million in cap already. Wow, I haven't seen that much cap space in years.
And get a free agent star with that money, man.
Yeah.
Okay, alrighty. So, okay. Hopefully you see a bunch of improvement on here, but like they did everything else right. Quarterback position is just looks like they're tanking for ours the way this is going.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Who's your second team on the list you wanted to cover?
My other team that I liked. I'll go with the Steelers, I guess. I think they're a fun team. What do you think of the Steelers? I don't know if you know much about the Steelers draft, but
I love the Harmon pick. I was like, when are they picking a quarterback? And then they went and didn't pick a quarterback until the Will Howard picks. I'm like, oh wow, very interesting, because I thought for sure either Milroe or Shador were going at their pick. Love the Caleb Johnson pick. Jack
Hmm.
Sawyer was a very underrated pick. I think he'll help out the defense a lot.
Hmm.
Um, there were a lot of selections I liked from what the Steelers did.
Yeah, and obviously I mentioned them, so I think that was good. I thought they did good too. Yeah, big fan of the Derek Harmon pick. He's a guy, can be a day one starter for them. And then just another guy keeping the defensive front young. You have him. You got Keanu Benton, who just kind of like forming that younger ish core of players. Obviously, Cam Hayward's still there, but he's still good. But it's like it feels like they're like almost a couple of steps ahead of the Saints, where the Saints have a lot of these aging players that you're like, there's a lot of holes that I envision them to have in the next couple of seasons, whereas the Steelers have been actively drafting guys to like slowly develop and fill these kind of aging players that come through. So, Derek Harmon, I'm a big fan of that. I was also a big fan of Caleb Johnson. It's a very clear Najee Harris replacement. They have similar measurables, I guess, similar play styles of just being like good downhill runners. Another great thing with Johnson as well is just that in college he was a good pass blocker, and so a lot of times these young running backs have that as a big struggle coming into the league, just because it's not something they're explicitly asked to do in college, and so the fact that he already kind of has some of that ability is solid for them as well. So I think they're just going to continue that 1-2 punch that they have with Jalen Warren, which I think has been kind of what has been working for their offense the last like 3 years or so, despite
Right.
the struggles of everything. I was also a big fan of Jack Sawyer. He has like he feels like a very average player. But right now, I mean, looking at the depth chart, he's not in a spot where he needs to start day one, and he can spend like a year or two developing, getting better, in addition to just being a rotational guy. Just because you got Watt and I think like Alex Hightower or something as kind of your
Highsmith. Yep.
Highsmith as your kind of two main edge rushers right now. And so I was a fan of that there. Um, Yaya Black, just the developmental guy. Nothing I found about him was like overly special. I think just a solid depth guy that you have behind Keanu Benton, and then Will Howard. um, it's gonna be the last guy I talk about with the Steelers, but overall, I was a fan of this pick. It showed not like super high commitment to a quarterback in this class, which I mean, like maybe they are pushing for a quarter. They're most likely pushing for a quarterback next year's draft. But this like brings some QB competition to the room. There's like, I mean, glaring weaknesses with him in terms of like uh, game speed, I think, and then just like lack of like play creation, I guess, from his side of things. So he kind of falls into that more of a classic pocket passer role. I think he has a big arm, so I mean that's good for Pickens and DK Metcalf if he does end up starting games. But it's like very clear there's going to be a quarterback competition going into the season. If he wins, I think that's a good thing, and kind of just shows where the league is at with Mason Rudolph. If Mason Rudolph wins the QB competition, I mean, Will Howard's a 6th-round pick. If they go quarterback next year, no one's going to bat an eye at this.
Yeah. I'm just surprised they went from Russell Wilson and Justin Fields to this.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, it's a
in
mess.
one off season. That is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it would
I
not
think
be
the big
hard.
thing with Howard is he's streaky, but is he going to get a legitimate shot?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? And or I should ask you this too: do you think George Pickens is out of the on his way out in Pittsburgh?
Um, I don't know. Like, I think it'd be better for the Steelers to try to keep him on the team. Because I'm personally a fan of like the way George Pickens plays. I mean, like despite regardless, I think there is a decent amount of room of improvement for George Pickens. We've seen like a lot of the flashes of like the crazy catches, but um, I think it'd be better to keep him around, especially like who does the Steelers even have as the rest of their team? receivers. Depth chart. I mean, you have Calvin Austin, Robert Woods, Roman Wilson, and Scotty Miller. I mean, like, and I guess Ben Skowronek, who used to be like the number 3 on the Rams, which is crazy. But I mean, if they move on from him, they have guys behind, which I guess I'd be relatively comfortable with. Especially if you have DK as your one. But the fact I think that Pickens was not traded during the draft might be a positive for him. And if anything, he'd start the season with the Steelers based off how the season goes. Like if they're winning games and staying competitive, I think you keep him. If you're struggling, you might end up trading him. It's kind of like my thoughts, because I think there'll be a team that loses like one of their main receivers, but is pushing for the playoffs, and then the Steelers like, hey, we got a guy, and then that's kind of like the move that I envision potentially happening, but I don't know.
I hear you on that. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of rumors, and if I were them, I would try and keep both Pickens and Metcalf.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to get a guy like Rodgers. I don't know what's going to go on there. That is
it's weird.
I don't know who to believe. Aaron Rodgers, a lot going on, or like Steelers, like still holding on hope. It's kind of in a weird phase right now. Okay, alrighty. We got next.
Do you want to talk about a team or?
Oh yeah, since we're right here, I'm gonna talk about the Seahawks and talk about what they did. I really loved like what they did in general. Like Greg Zabel, offensive line has always been a key problem for the Seattle Seahawks, and the fact they went with this guy who was projected to go at the end of the first round, but still a great player out of North Dakota State. Love that pick for what they needed. Nick Emanuwari, best safety off the board out of South Carolina. Elijah Arroyo, great big tight end target out of Miami. Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round, sitting behind Sam Darnold in that offense with Cooper Kupp and then JSN. Like, couldn't get better than that. Troy Horton out of Colorado State, I thought it was great. Even Riley Mills. There's not a lot of things I didn't even like. I didn't like. Even the 7th round pick, Damian Martinez. Like he's one of the top 5 or 6 backs that I had on my board, and they got him in the 7th round. Like that is just. I know they got Kenneth Walker. I know they got Charbonnet, but this is a guy that can carry an offense on his own too. So they got a lot of horses in the stable here in Seattle, and I just really like what they did on both sides of the ball. Like there's like 6 or 7 moves where I look at this and I'm like, man, they did a phenomenal job. So great job, Seahawks.
Yeah, I think they had a good draft here. I think getting offensive line, maybe like a potential change is just like getting more offensive linemen if you can. Just because I think, like you said, it's historically been a weakness. Sam Darnold, I feel like when he's been successful, it's because he's had strong offensive lines in front of him. When he's struggled, that's kind of a general statement of better O-lines equals better play from your quarterback. But, Sam Darnold has historic season with the Vikings, and you just so happens the Vikings have one of the better offensive lines in the league. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously they went round 1 with offensive linemen, but to see with a weaker offensive line how well he plays, which that helps you make more sense of the Jalen Milroe pick here too. It's like if Sam Darnold behind a weaker offensive line just can't handle it, you did invest a 3rd round pick in Jalen Milroe, right? Yeah.
And he could be the best quarterback in this class. That's how high his upside is. It's ridiculously insane.
Yeah, and then also, I was a huge fan of the Elijah Arroyo pick. He was one of my favorite tight ends going into this. He's just a freak athlete of a player, like just a beast in college. And I mean, that type of draft capital for a tight end is pretty typical. I feel like any tight end you draft from like the 1st to the 4th round, even 5th round, really, like I have halfway expectations that they might be starting in the league in then like 2 or 3 years or something like that. So I think he's a solid player that if it wasn't for this absolutely top end loaded tight ends that we had this year, I
Yeah.
think he would have generated a lot more buzz. He might have been even like a second round, right? Or he was a second round, yeah. So like, I mean, the fact that he was a second round guy that wasn't generating as much buzz as he should have been, I think. But we would have heard more had the top two guys not being picked 10 and 14.
But even Ben Taylor out of LSU, like
Mm-hmm.
really great tight end prospect. I liked as well. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
just tight end was loaded this year. But I think just for the fit on like what Seattle has going on, like they have a physical running back,
Mm-hmm.
two physical running backs,
Mm-hmm.
two slot machine like wide receivers. One of them that can play outside, but then you got like a seam ripper
Mm-hmm.
and Elijah Arroyo. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
much needed. Um, so they're slowly building out like the complementary pieces of their offense, and then
Mm-hmm.
Troy Horton, like he is. I don't know if he's the son of Joe Horton. Um, he might be related, but it's he played extremely well in Colorado State.
Mm-hmm.
You look at some of like the numbers he had, even though he missed time with a knee injury.
Mm-hmm.
167 passes for 2,267 yards and 16 touchdowns over 2 seasons. That's pretty reliable, pretty impressive. Very fast, even after a knee injury. Like he's like your explosive option. So to have that on top of your JSN and Cooper Cup, like you got ways where you can expand the field laterally and vertically down the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, when you're the later you get into the draft, it's a lot more upside kind of guys that you're hoping for, just guys that you're hoping develops into a little bit of something. And so, yeah, I'm not mad at all with this kind of pick, and I'm excited for it.
Okay, alrighty. How many more teams you got for us?
I mean, that's kind of mostly it. I mean, like I had thoughts on like the Texans. The Texans were a draft that I wasn't the greatest fan of. Uh, and then I think like the Cardinals, I think had a good one. Um, I mean, Cardinals are just because you got good value in, like with Will Johnson in the second round. Obviously, I mean, like I understand why he fell, um, but I mean, the fact that you get a guy who could potentially be the best cornerback of this class in the second round, I think is a solid value. Hopefully, his health issues aren't reoccurring. Um, because I mean, obviously, that's exactly why he fell in the draft. But still good enough, despite the injury risk, to take him in the middle of the second round. Um, Jordan Birch, not a bad player. Cody Simon, though, was actually a player that I was probably most excited for out of this Cardinals draft right here. I think he's a guy that could be an instant starter for the Cardinals. He's not a big off-ball linebacker. Like here it says he's only like 229 pounds, so he wouldn't be like he'd have to be a weak side kind of guy. But
It was
like
like an edge rush tween, even though he's really good on run blitzes.
yeah, and so but like he won the Rose Bowl defensive MVP. I think this recent year. I don't remember one of the year. I think this recent year. And he had the stats he had in that game were 11 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, and 2 sacks. And so like he went insane in the Rose Bowl, rightfully winning defensive MVP. And so I think he's a guy that again potentially could be a day one starter. Has a lot of upside. He's a faster player as well, so he's like decent in coverage, I think. And so yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens with him. And I think it's good value for where you're taking him as well.
Yeah. I will have a Cardinals player up on my list actually. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah, we can move on to
okay.
that if you want. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I did a little bit out of order, but
Okay.
my third favorite player coming out of the draft. Tahj Brooks for Cincinnati. Let's see, how do we do this? Picked in the 6th round under Texas Tech. I'll probably stop sharing here because I kind of have a write up on him. Um, I think it was top 5 or top 6 in my rankings too, but I wasn't expecting him to be like a day 2, day 1 type pick just because I ranked him there. I think his agility and production he's had in college, crazy insane. He's like, even though he's like built like a tank, and like you would think like, oh, this is just like Marshawn Lynch when you see him.
Mhm.
He ran for 1,500 yards, and his yards per carry average. And I know this is bad of me to say this because I don't rely on yards per carry as an accurate statistic. 5.2, and that was consistent between each of the past 2 seasons. So combine that with 13 and a half touchdowns per year, like over 2 years, sitting behind Chase Brown, who's like kind of like your do-it-all like Swiss Army knife. I think that's a great counterpunch that the Cincinnati Bengals have. And you have a similar guy like Zach Moss already in the room, that you can learn from and kind of refine your grade. I think this is like the Bengals bell cow in the near future, and for a team that just spent a lot of money on Jamar Chase and T Higgins,
Mhm.
this is a move they had to make. And
Yeah.
I just love the value, especially in the 6th round. Like
Mhm.
crazy good pick here.
Yeah, and then like going back to that like whole yards per carry thing, like sure it's like it doesn't tell you everything. There's a lot more factors about it, but I think it's just like a sign of when things are good, they can actually produce. Because obviously the other side of the conversation is like a guy that you think is good but is only having like 3 yards a carry. You're like, okay, there's a lot more questions about the team and his overall ability to play. That you have to like account for. So I'd rather. I feel like I have less worries with a 5 yards per carry player, because
Yeah,
when it's
yeah.
good, when it's
I think
working, it's
for
good.
yards per carry, it's one of those things where if you're looking at comparing Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, and
Hmm.
like a Najee Harris to like um a Jalen Warren when they were both on the Steelers, like that's when yards per carry isn't a reliable stat,
Hmm.
because when you see Ezekiel Elliott on the field or Najee Harris on the field, you're not thinking, oh no, I got to watch them on a option play when the quarterback drops back to pass. You're like,
Hmm.
I'm loading 6 or 7, 8 guys on the
Yeah.
defense to stop the run, right? But with
Hmm.
Tony Pollard or like Jalen Warren, anything could happen. So you're like, you got to go in like a nickel package or something like that.
Hmm.
And that's where kind of the yards per carry stat becomes conflated a bit,
Hmm.
because like you don't see the personnel like that defenses use in those situations. And that's why I much rather lead on like how effective were they like in certain run schemes, and like with the personnel around them, plus like what they have in their control to like navigate. If a guy just suddenly shoots up the A gap, can they avoid that, or are
Hmm.
they not quick enough to adjust to that?
Hmm.
When you're parsing like elite running backs versus,
Hmm.
you're good, don't worry, average running backs.
Uh-huh.
So, but Tahj Brooks' case, it's not like you're talking about dropping in him into a situation where you have 2 explosive receivers outside
Hmm.
and a quarterback like Joe Burrow who can get anybody the ball at a time. Like, he will check to the right plays and put this guy in a position to um, make plays. And I just mentioned the lead agility. With what he's has going on and the running back room he's going into, I think this is a great situation that he's in. This is a great team fit.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Good selection there. So I guess yeah, for my third favorite pick, that's the guy we talked about quite a lot actually. But this is Luther Burden. I think he's a guy that a lot of people had as a potential first round grade at worst, kind of like an early second kind of guy. And so the fact that the Bears able to get him in the second round, he was your wide receiver one off the board. I think was just really great value from them. It felt like a pretty strong case of like a best player available for the Bears. Obviously, I think different teams may have had their own BPA, obviously, but I think for the Bears, he's probably up there on that list. So they're able to get him. And like I mentioned earlier, I think he's a clear, 2 year from now, DJ Moore kind of replacement where you're rocking with Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and Luther Burden as your kind of three-headed. I mean, obviously Loveland's there too, but is your three-headed monster with your quarterback wide receiver combination. And obviously we talked about him a lot already, so I won't rehash everything else again. But yeah, pretty simple, straightforward. But yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, I mean, I love Luther. I think just the versatility that the Bears had in this draft and that they now have on the offensive side of the ball, you did not have in the Eberflus era at all.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I was hoping for when the year before we were trying to, and I was like, why spend it on Caleb Williams? Justin Fields is playing fine. He needs a Marvin Harrison and a Rome Odunze.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted two of either Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, and Rome Odunze when they were all projected to go top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Bears have put that situation in their spot and got a second tight end to compete with Cole Kmet / work and complement him.
Mm-hmm.
They look a lot more versatile now, and that's why I'm really excited about Caleb Williams' prospects this year. So just as far as like building around Caleb, great selection, and then you pile it on with the trades they made for offensive linemen plus the Ozzie pick. They're committed to like making sure the overall structure of the offense is great, and they do not neglect the offensive line this time. So I know the Bears have been always dubbed as offseason champs, but I think they have the right system in place to make that work.
Yeah, it's just nice to see. It feels like a nice firm offseason commitment to building around Caleb Williams or just the quarterback in general, where I feel like, we've talked about the Bears being offseason winners in the past. But it's like they've won in these aspects, but they've harshly neglected this, where like I feel like offensive line has been somewhat neglected despite, you're just like, oh, we have Justin Fields. He should be successful now because we added this wide receiver, Cole Kmet. We re-signed him. We brought in DeAndre Swift, so you're like, oh, there's all these pieces, but then he's running for his life all the time. This offseason, you bring in those offensive weapons like Loveland, like Burden, but you also bring in three new starting offensive linemen to kind of like, again, actually commit to your quarterback, which I'm excited for. I'm excited for Ben Johnson and what the Bears have to do this year.
Yep. Me too. Cardinals player I was referring to, you expressed love for him as well. Falling in the draft. Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. I think he was pretty pissed off that he did not get drafted in the first round, much like Shedeur Sanders. But I'm just looking at the talent. Like this guy is like a game wrecker, game changer, and I think the Cardinals need that because if I look at their cornerback room, they have Sean Murphy-Bunting, Starling Thomas, Garrett Williams, Max Melton, who I was a big fan of coming out of Rutgers. I thought he and his brother Bo Melton were really talented players that were under the radar, but they haven't exactly returned anything on investment yet. I think Sean Murphy-Bunting is probably the most experienced of the bunch, but you're dropping into a situation where he can absolutely become the best cornerback on the team and significantly boost a pass defense in Arizona when you're talking about going against the San Fran. I still think they're talented. The Rams, even though they don't have Cooper Kupp, they have Devontae Adams and Puka. They're always going to be with Matthew Stafford from the helm. They're always going to be a juggernaut. And then the Seahawks. We just talked about Cooper Kupp and JSN. Those are not going to be easy covers, and Will Johnson is going to be much needed. I thought this is a great selection. This could be the steal of the draft.
Yeah, and like I said earlier too, this could be the best cornerback in the draft. I think a lot of people had him as the best one. The only thing
Morrison, Morrison was in a great spot too.
Yeah, it was literally just the injury concerns holding him back again, which is valid. But again, Cardinals get potentially the best cornerback in the class in round 2, and it's not even super far fall either to, so it's like teams are still like not doubting the kind of injury to the point where he's getting drafted in the second.
Right.
For my second favorite pick, I'm going to go with Josh Simmons, offensive tackle for the Chiefs. It pains me to say the Chiefs had a good pick here, but I mean, Chiefs being the Chiefs, feel like they consistently make good picks outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, apparently. But
They're not gonna let that go, huh?
it's kind of funny. But anyways, obviously the glaring issue for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl was the offensive line, among other issues that there were for that game. Obviously, it's weaknesses get exposed a lot more when you're facing an elite team like the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
And it's not something you're necessarily having to deal on a game-to-game basis the rest of the season, but it's nice in a way that you got to know where you're weakest at with the offensive line. And so, you invest a first-round pick here, which I think that's how teams win, is by investing in the trenches. I mean, you look at the Broncos last season. I think their offensive line is like rated like top 5 in the league for a lot of the portions throughout the season. And it's why I think Bo Nix had such a great year last season.
Right.
I mean, sure, he played good football. He made crazy plays. But I mean, you invested a ton of cash in the offensive line. And they were able to keep, Bo Nix upright, even though the run game was struggling quite a bit, And so the Chiefs, at that same philosophy of just, strengthening your trenches will get you further into the playoffs, have more success. And it could have been a part of the reason why Patrick Mahomes struggled throughout the course of the last season. Obviously injuries too, but like just not having as strong of an offensive line to keep him upright and having him to kind of play more hero ball. But with this pick, we maybe see less of it. Could be a stronger Chiefs going into this season.
Yeah, I don't think they're done yet
Mm-hmm.
with upgrading it, because you still have Caliendo and Jawan Taylor in that starting lineup. So
Yeah.
it's there's some work to be done, but I think
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Moore signing that from the Niners,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to hedge your bets, but making sure you got the left side right, because you
Mm-hmm.
losing Joe Tooney and having him start at tackle, like it was kind of like just a double whammy for the team. So like you have to start with the exterior pressure as much as you can, and then
Mm-hmm.
uh, hope like you can fill out the rest of the spots. So
Yeah.
yeah, I thought this was a great pick. I don't think they're all the way there yet with their offensive line,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the other spots in the roster are fully built out, and then you also have to consider their aging roster now. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, they had to do something. Um, first favorite draft pick. It's probably no surprise. I've been raving about this guy since the start of the draft. Jalen Milroe, Seattle Seahawks. I thought it was just a great value. Just for context on the financials, like his rookie deal will be 6.2 million or 4 years, whereas like Sam Darnold's is like 3 years for 101 million basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Jalen Milroe becomes a starter, the sky's the limit, because he's going to a great situation with great offensive weapons, great coach, great defensive coach, and the fact they got him on this deal was like really nice because he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to start right away.
Yeah.
But if he does the little things right and takes the time to get himself ingratiated in the full system,
Mm-hmm.
he can be better than Cam Ward with
Yeah.
those legs and that ability. Like for him, it's more of like the mental and like the precise nature of the game, which comes with time and which comes with sitting behind a pro like Sam Darnold. Like Sam Darnold knows how to throw the football. For him, his problem is like he doesn't have the athleticism that Jalen Milroe has to navigate
Mm-hmm.
pressure. Like
Yeah.
his first instinct was like, if I don't have a check down, I'm panicking and throwing this like somewhere or taking the sack. Like
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Milroe will make something happen out of nothing, even if the situation is not the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
But like he'll learn from Sam Darnold, where it's like, oh, how do I make this play? Like when I don't have my legs with me, or like how do I function within the scheme? That's going to be super important. And I thought for like where he got selected, um,
Mm-hmm.
rather than when he got selected, was super important. I think John Schneider, I think yeah, he did a phenomenal job in this draft in general. Loved what the Seahawks were doing, but this pick in particular,
Mhm.
this will be the best pick in the draft class if it pans out.
Yeah. Yeah, we were both pretty high on Jalen Milroe in the mock draft. I think I had the Steelers drafting him potentially, all the way up in the first round. Obviously, I knew that was probably a reach. I was like, realistically, if they're going for him, they probably trade down and try to get him that way. But I did like the fit. Obviously, he goes to the Seahawks. Like you said, he gets an opportunity to like develop, and it's nice, like he's not. It's not like draft capital to the point where you're demanding him to start day one and play at a highly proficient level. It's like,
Yeah, he's not getting Jackson Dart contract. That's
Mhm.
that's the reason why I didn't put Jackson Dart here, despite him going into like a good situation with the
Mhm.
Giants.
Yeah, and it's
Now,
like,
like the
yeah, the nice thing about getting your quarterback in the first, especially late first round picks, is just the fact that you have that 5th year option, so you get one extra year of kind of like
right.
that cheaper contract. But again, it's like the capital you spend with Milroe is like obviously you're invested in his development to a decent extent, but if it doesn't work out, you're not so committed to the pick
Yeah,
that
you didn't have to trade picks to go and get the
Mhm.
guy. So
It's like, let's say, 2 years, like a year or two from now, you're in a spot where you can get a superstar quarterback in the first round. It's not like, I'm sure it sucks that you spent as much capital, but it's not world ending capital where, like, when the Cardinals drafted Josh Rosen, and then the very next year they go and get Kyler Murray. Despite, I mean, Rosen wasn't really that good in the first place, but it's like one of those cases where you wish you'd almost spent that, or you definitely wish you spent that Josh Rosen pick on literally any other player in the draft so that
yeah,
you build a little bit better on Kyler Murray. But,
right.
so it's better here for the Seahawks to spend this kind of capital here. And like you said, I really love his upside. And I think it's a great upside to have where you take him in the draft as well. Yeah.
Close us out, man.
I guess one of my favorite, I don't know if this is like my favorite, but this is another one that I just really, really loved was Jalen Noel, wide receiver for the Texans. I think they drafted him in the 3rd round. And it's like I have this with like a asterisk or like a caveat to it. It's like I would have loved this pick even more if their first pick wasn't Jaden Higgins. Or it was like the Texans. I mean, they ended up going offensive tackle in the 2nd round, but I would have liked them to almost literally go any other position round, or I guess the top of the 2nd. But then I also look at the Texans receiving room, and it's like buns.
How like time flies, man. Like
Yeah.
since like a year ago.
Uh huh. Yeah, because I mean, you look at the Texans depth chart, and it's like Nico Collins is obviously your one. Then your number 2 is Christian Kirk, who I am a fan of. The issue is Kirk with kind of just like the injury history over the last little bit. And then your number 3 is Tank Dell, who I don't envision really playing that much football this season with his injury recovery. We'll see how that goes. And then John Mechie is kind of your next guy with Justin Watson, Xavier Hutchinson, Braxton Berrios, and you're like, okay, so that's kind of where we're at. So I understand the need for receiver. I think it's a higher need than I think a higher need than more people really expected. But with Jalen Noel, obviously Jalen Higgins good. It's kind of fun that they drafted 2 guys from the same school. I feel like that's a lot of fun to do, But with Jalen Noel, he was a baller at Iowa State, right? Like last season, he had 80 catches, just under 1,200 yards for 8 touchdowns. But then you look at his junior season as well, and that's 66 catches, 820 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So it's like a lot of receivers that that get this high draft capital. It's typically you see, they had a breakout season their last year college. The Packers guy, oh my gosh, oh my screen flip. Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden, he had an explosive season last season. I understand why he went in the first round, but then you look at Jalen Noel, who had 2 great years of college at the very end. He played games as a freshman. He's an elite return specialist as well. So if you can play him at receiver, obviously, because he has skill there, but then you also can get him at return as a return man. where he excelled at in college. And so I think this is just a tremendous value pick, third round guy that could potentially be your wide receiver too. And your returner and your main returner, and so I'm a huge fan of this, and yeah, obviously, and it's fun to have him with Higgins.
Only thing I have to add is the Texans have 3 guys with the same first name technically. They picked Jalen Noel in the 3rd round with the 15th overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Smith in the 3rd round, 33rd pick, and then Jalen Reed.
Mm-hmm.
That is spelled with an E, not an I, in the 6th.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just really funny
Yeah.
to see that. Like, man, a random draft fact I found out just looking at the roster. But
Mm-hmm.
I loved Jaden Higgins. So
Mm-hmm.
if this works out for like best case scenario, you got your trio of wide receivers
Mm-hmm.
between the Iowa State guys and Nico Collins, and then plus a Tank Dell returning from injury. I think they're
Yeah.
set up really, really well. Like right now, Christian Kirk is a serviceable wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be a great fit for them. But then you have these young guys waiting in the wings and John Mechie to step up. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the Texans set themselves up. Only reason I don't have them in my favorite draft class, just personally, is what the heck was that? When you traded like your best offensive tackle and then only picked one all draft class. Now, granted, they picked the guy in the 2nd round, but
Yeah.
I was expecting more out of the Texans in that regard because they didn't even pick a guard.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like
that's slightly concerning after the season CJ Stroud had.
yeah, where it's like I mean, Higgins and Noel are both. I think they both can be good players. But it feels just with how the season went last year, it felt like these are almost luxury picks that
They
one of
didn't
them
need to make.
at least didn't need to get made. Whereas, like you said, your best offensive lineman leaves. I am a huge fan of Irsay. He's strong at both run and pass blocking. So obviously, super. I think great value for them there. But it's
I don't
like,
have anything with the pick they made for offensive tackle.
mm-hmm.
I'm just more saying get more bites at the apple in that
Yeah.
position group.
Yeah, because I'm like either at the Higgins pick or the Noel pick. Like, imagine, you draft whoever your own personal best player, offensive lineman is, just to keep on both. Because that was the whole issue with the Texans last season. Was like
Right.
CJ Stroud just couldn't stay upright. And
They
it's
had
like,
Mixon, they had Stephon Diggs, they had Collins, they had Adele. Like they looked star-studded. Like I picked CJ Stroud to have the most passing yards this season, but like their
yeah,
offensive line was a massive weakness.
yeah, and it's like it almost
Something
felt like
about
the
it.
budget Chiefs, where it's like the Chiefs with their offensive line struggles. I mean, they're just better on all fronts, which is why they've made it to the Super Bowl. But like, like we see that it's like O-line is really much needed. Despite how annoyingly bad, or not annoyingly, the funnily bad the Cowboys are, they've always been good at investing in the offensive line, and so that's why
They had a
regardless
great
of
first 2 picks in their draft. Like
Mhm.
they did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, and so I was surprised, but also not surprised with the Cowboys offensive line pick, where it's like
Right.
I expected them to make the flashy wide receiver pick, but then
I
also
think once Tet went down, like to the Carolina, they're like, okay, we can't pick them.
yeah, but then you also think like fundamentally, the Cowboys have been a team committed to drafting in the trenches and getting good guys to block for their offense, and
That's
so
when they've been at their best.
yeah, and so these O linemen panning out, I think, will be good for them. Also crazy, Dak Prescott's been in the league 10 years now. Ain't that crazy?
We're old.
Dude.
We're old, man. Like
Yeah.
I remember when he was like going up, like facing the Legion of Boom with like Ezekiel Elliott in that running game. Like when they went, I think they won like 12 or 13 games in his first season, and everybody's like, this guy is the difference maker. He is
Yeah.
like Romo is non-obsolete right now. And ever since then, they haven't made much headway. Still have to get to the conference championship. Longer drought than the Bears. Just want to point that out. But
Uh-huh.
yeah. I think they're
Yeah.
the only team in the NFC to not make it to the conference championship in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay, alrighty.
Okay.
Got anything else for the audience here?
I don't think so. Kind of
Alrighty, running
my
on an
draft.
hour. Got to jump right on to record basketball with Diego. Playoffs are in full swing. I don't know
Yeah.
if you saw the Knicks and the Denver Nuggets games
Bro,
yesterday.
playoffs are crazy right now for basketball.
Dude, yeah, insane. It's getting crazy. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Warriors Wolves should be good.
Hmm.
Blanking on the other series right now. I think it's Pacers and Cavs tonight, but yeah, that's gonna be my focus. But hope you guys enjoyed the draft. Sorry for taking too long to get this out, but now's the fun part. Now that we know that where teams are, we can start doing our off-season series and whatnot, and get right back at it. So until
Hmm.
then, you guys take it easy. Follow us on our Instagram page at amon.a.mission, our YouTube channel Amon a Mission, and until then, we'll see you cats later.
Yeah. Peace.